Well, again, good morning. Welcome to Church of the Way. My name is Daryl, and I get the pleasure of being with you today as we come together in worship. But being how we're meeting at a different time, we're a little bit earlier, I thought we would, do some chores. And being how it is springtime, and chores means it's planting season, so we're going to do a little bit of gardening, okay? I hope this helps. It may just be fun for me, so I apologize if it is. So, I've got a little table here, and I'm going to make some noise. And I have my notes. I should probably refer to those once or twice today. And I have a bucket. And in the bucket is some dirt. Okay? If I can show you quickly. Here, bucket of, that's dirt. Potting soil, a little bit of vermiculite, And I got a few cups. And I have some seeds. All right? Now, one of these is cilantro. Who here likes cilantro? Who here thinks it tastes like soap? I'm sorry. I'll plant extra for you. Now, here's my question. My question is, and this is going to be obvious, and you guys are smart, and and you've planted stuff. So, if I were to take this cup and I take the seeds, what should I do? What is the order? I don't want to plant that many. That'd be crazy. Give extra to less. What would the order be? Should I put the seeds in first?
No.
And then take my dirt and fill it up? Sorry, how are we doing?
Not good.
Right? So, and if hey, it needs water, and I was supposed to have a cup of water, but I didn't. And I add some water. That's not going to work, right? The poor seeds don't have a chance. They can't succeed. They're just buried under the weight. It's like, that doesn't help, right? Now what if, here's the fun ones, okay? These seeds they're called Trinidad Moruga Scorpion. It says super hot pepper seeds. So these seeds, a jalapeno is like, a Scoville is 8,000 to 10,000. These, the Scoville units is 2 million.
Wow.
2 million. These are like little suns or stars, right? Nuclear fission. Now, let's say I want to do this properly. The first thing I should do is put dirt, right? You guys are smart. I mean, this is why I love being here. Right? Put put a little bit of soil in. Technically it's soil, not dirt. Put some soil in, and now make a little depression or two. Put on hazmat suit and gloves, and take these little seeds out and I do want to plant some of these, because every church property needs to have nuclear power plants growing in the back.
Then you're supposed to lick your hand.
Right. Okay. So if I add water to this, a few days, maybe a week or two, what should happen? What would we fully expect?
Sprout.
It's going to sprout. And then as it grows, what's going to happen? It sends roots down into it, and it grows, and then what would we expect? Fruit, like lots of it, And because what we're going to do in a few weeks is we're going to have a sampling of the Moruga scorpion pepper. I'm just kidding, we're not.
John says he's eating.
Okay, here's my point. The order of things, the way we do things, the order of how we should do things or approach things is very important. And it is absolutely self-evident. It is about as self-evident as how we should plant a seed. We all understand, right? We understand that the order of things is important. As we come to the last week of our overview of the book of Romans, one of the things I want us to observe today is that the book of Romans unfolds in a particular order, and that is very intentional and very critical for you and me. It's beautiful, actually. Because if we get the order wrong, it just isn't going to work. If we get it right, by God's grace, we grow, we produce fruit, So let me explain. Interesting that John chose to read Romans chapter 12, verse 1, because that's where we're going today, and I didn't even tell John. So turn to Romans chapter 12. I won't spend a lot of time in review of where we're at and who. So, book of Romans is written by Paul to the church in Rome, about 30 years after the resurrection of Christ, give or take, 25 years or so. And the theme verse, and no doubt you should remember this. This is the thesis of the whole book. Romans chapter 1, verse 16 and 17 says, we're not there yet. I didn't put this on the screen, sorry. Romans chapter 1, verse 16 and 17 says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel," Paul writes, "because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes." I'm not ashamed of the gospel, Paul writes, "for it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. For in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith." So in a very real sense, the rest of the book is going to unpack that statement, right? It's going to give the rationale and the implications of what this statement is. That we are saved, the salvation, the righteousness of God is received by faith and by faith alone. Okay? So that's where we're going. So, jump ahead to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 begins with, as we read already, it says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers." Now pause just a minute. What's the first word? Therefore. And we all know that when you see the word therefore, what do? You see what it's there for. Okay? So you look back. Now the beautiful thing about this one singular word, and in this context, what Paul says, he says, "Therefore I urge you." Therefore. And what is the therefore? Because of the entirety of the previous 11 chapters. So what Paul has done is he's linking whatever he's going to say after this, he's linking it in light of, because of, the previous 11 chapters. So what have we covered in the last 11 chapters? And this is better sound repetitious, because we've been hammering at this for the last several weeks. So the first 3 chapters, more or less, there's an introduction, and it's gorgeous, and it's beautiful, and there's a lot more. But primarily it talks about that all mankind, whether you're a Jew who's grown up worshiping God in the temple, and you have the law and the Torah, or you are a Gentile and you've never even heard of God, you and we all stand equally guilty before our holy God, don't we? We have the famous verse, we all have sinned and fall short of the glory, the perfect holy standard of God. Moreover, that sin, that rejection of God, has an effect, it has a consequence, it has a penalty, right? That penalty is that we now stand deserving God's holy and righteous wrath. We now stand deserving death. The penalty, the payment of sin, is death, what we deserve for our rejection of God. Because God, being holy and just and fair and righteous, has to deal with sin and injustice and evil. Now here's where it gets good though. But the gift of God is what? It's the gift of God is what Christ has done for us. God, compelled by his love, sent his only Son to die on the cross, moreover, and to rise from the dead. And by his death, the shedding of his blood, he brings salvation. Because of his gracious work on our behalf, as we talked about last week, as our substitute, Christ takes the place of us so that the wrath of God is poured out on him, satisfying the holy, righteous wrath of God. And it gets even better, the righteousness of God, Paul writes, is applied to you and I. So that now when God looks at us, he doesn't see us as sinners, he sees us as righteous before him, able to be in his presence. Well, that's the good news. That is the gospel message, is it not? That is it doesn't get any better. Like, pack up, let's go home, and let's just celebrate, because that's the truth. Because what that brings, as we've talked about a few weeks ago, is one, it brings, Paul writes, peace with God. So God is now, like, I'm at peace with Him. I have a relationship with Him. Again, is it because of me? Is it because of my goodness and my no. It's because of Christ's work on my behalf. Also, we talked about this, it means that I have security and hope. Chapter 5 puts it positively. What I have is I am justified by Christ. Chapter 8 puts it negatively, meaning what I don't have is therefore there is no condemnation. So I have peace with God, I have hope, and I have security. Again, my security is found not because of me and what I do, but by what Christ has already completely and fully done in my behalf, which changes everything. Okay? Chapters 9 through 11, and I won't talk a whole lot about this, and frankly, I want to do a little more study before I would talk a lot more on it. Gives one of the questions, in particular, if you're a congregation that's made up of Jewish people and Gentile people, and one of the questions that comes up is, okay, what about the Israelites who are God's chosen people who are worshiping God? So, what does that mean for them? What does this gospel mean for them? And one of the things Paul is very clear is his heart breaks for his fellow Jews who don't know Christ, and he makes it very clear that whether you're Jew or Gentile, whether you've grown up with the law or not, you are saved all the same way by placing your faith in Jesus Christ for the salvation of your soul. Okay? And it goes on and talks about how, but that being said, God is not done with Israel. There's a future for Israel. There's a future for the Jewish people, etc. That's chapters 9 through 11 more in a hyper-simplistic way. And now we come to chapter 12. Because that's the therefore. Now we come to chapter 12. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercies, to. Now he's moving. So you see that? Now he says, I want you to, he's going to do something. So the previous 11 chapters, more or less, has been a massive theological treatise of doctrine. This is truth. Biblical truth. This is who God is. This is who humanity is. This is what Christ has done. This is what it means for you. And this is what it changes. Here's the truth. Therefore, I want you to do something. Paul, basically for the rest of the book of Romans, except for the very end, that's a really cool ending for another day, is going to talk about what's the application of all this truth? What does it mean for you and me? So what? How should that change us? And listen to what he says. I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. Now first, in view of God's mercy. What a beautiful, concise little statement that packs in everything that he has explained in the previous 11 chapters. That's the grace, that's the mercy of God, is it not? In view of all of that, in view of the manifold, the infinite, the incredible mercy that God shows on you and I, we should do what? We should offer, present, hand over our bodies as living sacrifices. Now, our bodies, what does he mean by that? I mean, our physical bodies? Sure. But our physical bodies are really just what we live in and what we use to live, right? So we understand this. This implication is obvious. What he's saying is, present your lives as a living sacrifice. Now, what does your life consist of? Let me rephrase that, let me be a little more clear. What did last week for you consist of? Everybody do laundry? Okay? What Paul is saying is, in view of chapters 1 through 11, in view of what Christ has done, you doing laundry can be an act of worship to God. In fact, it ought to be. How, make sense? Anybody drive down 27? Yeah, I'm stepping on my own toes here. How I drive down Highway 27. Sailors nod your head like, See, that is to be an act of worship to God. In fact, it gets to be, it can be. In fact, I present my day, I present my occupation, I present my work, I present my celebrations, my relaxation, my fun, I present, it is my whole life is to be handed over to God as a sacrifice of service to Him, that my life is now His. Why? Because then things will go fantastic for me. Then I'll get rich, then I'll get healthy, then I'll get... No. Why? In view of what I gain? No. In view of God. In view of God's mercy. The only appropriate response is one of worship. Now, Paul, he alludes to this already. At the end of chapter 11, okay? So again, chapters 1 through 11, more or less, are this beautiful, it's just fantastic construction, this logical and rational case of the doctrines of the Christian faith. At the end of this whole section, what does Paul do? He worships. Look at chapter 11, verse 33 and following. It says, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable His judgments and the paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been His counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay them? Oh, for from Him and through Him and for Him are all things." And listen to this last phrase. This is how he ends this section. He says, "To Him be the glory, the praise forever. Amen." What is Paul's response when he looks at theology and the doctrines and the truths of the Christian faith and what it means? What is his response? But to say, glory to God forever. He worships God. In his next sentence that he writes down, "Therefore, in view of God's mercies, present your life as a living sacrifice." So, back to chapter 12. Living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. This is your spiritual worship. This is the rational, reasonable response for the view of what God has done. Is that my life is not mine. It is Christ. To do as He wills. And that as an act of worship. Holy and pleasing to Him. Okay. The rest of the next section, is Paul unpacking that phrase. What does that mean? A holy and pleasing sacrifice to God. Well, let's cruise through this. In the next verse it says, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and reprove what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." So, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. I like to be corrected. Be corrected and transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do you see it? Paul says, first 11 chapters, I want you to understand something. I want you to know something. I want you to get this in your head. This is truth. This is doctrine. This is theology. Now, I want that to change how you live. Jump down, it says, verse 9. So the implications of the next few verses talk about we are to serve, humbly serve, how God has wired and gifted us. So the responses that, or how he's wired us, is we should use those for the edification and building up of the church. Chapter 9, listen to these verses. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay any with evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. Now, if it is possible, as far as depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take advantage, my friends, but leave room for God's. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord, and so forth. Okay, we do not have to be a seminary theologian, professor, whatever. You don't have to have a PhD in Greek to understand what Paul is laying down right here, right? Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Can we understand that? Yep, got it. Honor one another above yourselves. Pretty clear, huh? Do you see the application? Paul says, in view of God's mercies, this is what your life should be. You want to know what worshiping God is? What your reasonable worship of God is? It has far less to do about music and far more about honoring one another. Not taking revenge. Clinging to what is good. In the rest of this book, he's going to talk about how we handle our civil lives, how do we handle our lives with the government, how our social lives, how do we handle each other and those both within the church and outside of the church. And you go to chapters 14 and 15, this great section that talks about, hey, we have tremendous freedom in Christ, but there's also tremendous responsibility, so how do we live with that, particularly in the church? And everything Paul writes down is perennially applicable to our lives, isn't it? But here's my point. The order is important. Because chapter 12 comes after what?
1 through 11.
1 through 11. See, all too often, we get the order mixed up. And we start with chapter 12. We start with, okay, I got to love my enemy. And then how does that go? Right? We start with, okay, I need to be a better person. I need to, and we rattle off something like, maybe chapter 13, giving honor to the government authorities. Whoa. Well, they're not very honorable sometimes. Or, you get the idea. We start there, and then we're like, ugh. Because I gotta jump ahead. Let's say we blow it. We sin. We sin against a holy God. By the way, probably. And I sin against a holy God. I don't meet his standard. Now, I can have several. I can now say, oh, I blew it. How could God ever love me? I blew it again. How in the world? And therefore, he cannot love me. So what does chapters 1 through 11 tell me? Or now, you know what? I'm no longer saved. I'm no longer whatever. What does chapters 1 through 11 tell me? I can have this feeling, but the truth is, what? Or I can take the feeling, oh, I will never, ever, ever, ever. I'll never have victory over this sin. I'll never have victory over this habit. I'll never have victory, whatever. And we can feel that way, can't we? But see, we're starting with chapter 12. That's not where Paul starts, is it? Paul starts with the truth. He says, you need to get this in your head. Because of Christ's victory on the cross, you are victorious. You are no longer a slave to sin, but a slave to righteousness. Now, when I read chapters 1 through 11, the beautiful part about it is these doctrines are like completed, finite facts. Period. There's no condemnation. Period. Not there's no condemnation unless, no, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. So even though I may feel like I should be condemned, if I allow God's word to conform you see what I'm saying? Paul's pattern through almost all of his books, and we're going to see this in the weeks ahead, is that he anchors what we are to do, our practice, our lives, he anchors it to the theological truths of Scripture and God's Word. I have a quote, pretend I have time for it. Because all of theology, I can find it. I just forgot it. Sorry. You guys ever know what it means to have a brain gap? Gone. Our entire lives, it says, all of life is theological. All of life is theological. As a Christian, everything we do is theological, isn't it? All of our whole lives. Theology absolutely matters. Doctrine matters because as we allow the doctrine to change and conform us, then, and only then our lives can be transformed. Then our lives can change. Then our habits are changed. Not because we just have more willpower, but because it is the power of Christ working in us as we allow him to transform our thinking. Because then, as I grow in my understanding of who God is and what he's done and the realities and the truth of that, as I grow in my understanding of his words, as I send down roots into theology and doctrine in God's word, then what happens? Then I can reach for the sky and worship and honor God. Then my life is holy and pleasing sacrifice to God. Then my life will it'll look like the righteousness that has been applied to me. It'll reflect that reality. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, as we kind of wrap up quickly this overview of Romans, we stand in awe. Once again, we recognize that it is not by us, but it is by your grace that you've shown us, and your mercies that you have poured out over us. And we say thank you. God, this week, would you transform our minds and our thinking to conform to your word and the realities, starting with the realities of chapters 1 through 11, so that our lives truly are an act of holy and pleasing act of worship to you, because that is the only reasonable response we should have. We love you in Jesus' name.